Welcome to the Digital Identity Digest, the audio companion to the blog at Spherical Cow Consulting. I'm Heather Flanagan, and every week I break down interesting topics in the field of digital identity, from credentials and standards to browser weirdness and policy twists. If you work with digital identity but don't have time to follow every specification or hype cycle, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Congratulations! Getting your talk accepted is a really big deal. No, it really, really is, I promise. And there's that moment, right, that happens when the acceptance email comes and you're there thinking, awesome, that worked. And then you think, oh, now I actually have to give the talk, which is usually where your mental model about the whole situation shifts, because there's no shortage of advice on how to prepare for a conference talk. If anything, there's too much of it, and you can quickly find yourself reading articles, watching videos, comparing approaches, and wondering which version of a good speaker you're supposed to become in the next few weeks. So I'm going to add to that noise because I want to walk through a few practical things that tend to matter from what I've observed. Now, this is not, my way is certainly not the only way to do it. It is not the one true way. But these are things in my experience that make a lot of difference between a talk that lands well and one that doesn't. So yeah, I'm going to actually start in a place that a lot of people don't usually start these kind of advice pieces. And that's the recommendation that go back and read the speaker agreement. I know, it's not exciting. It reads like boilerplate, and you probably just clicked accept when you submitted the proposal and moved on. But that document's actually pretty important because it's going to tell you what the expectations are, right? And how the conference is actually going to work. It's not just legal language, it's an operational reality for the event. At minimum, you're usually agreeing to be present for the event, not just your session. You're generally agreeing to accept the schedule you're given, to meet the deadlines for slides and materials, and to follow the content guidelines, which include things like avoiding product pitches and, yes, using the conference PowerPoint template. You are generally agreeing that your talk may be recorded and that your slides shared more broadly. And if that's something you or your employer care about, this is the moment that you really should notice that, right? And let's dig into the timing issue. When your talk is accepted, you don't get to know when you're speaking. That does get sorted out later once the full agenda comes together. Which means if you go ahead and book your travel, assuming you'll be speaking at a convenient time, whatever convenient means for you, you're possibly setting yourself up for one of two things: either having to cancel your talk or a very expensive lesson. Many people only make this mistake once, right? Because they book a return flight for right after they think their talk is going to be. How likely is it really going to be on the last day? So I'm going to go ahead and leave on the last day, only to find out that their session is scheduled for the last day, right when they were planning to leave for the airport. Now you're changing flights, rebooking hotels, and starting the conference possibly slightly annoyed. All of this is avoidable. Either plan to be there for the full event, or wait until your slot is confirmed before you actually lock things in. Now from there, let's talk about the part that tends to generate some pretty strong opinion, and I'm going to talk about the slide template. Look, nobody loves conference templates. They tend to be very rigid. They tend to be outdated. Sometimes they're not really even actual templates. They're just a recycled slide deck with the appropriate branding. I get it. They're a pain. Use them anyway. Now, to be fair, there are speakers who strongly disagree with this advice because they have developed their own style over the years, sometimes over decades of speaking. And their slides are part of how they think and communicate and tell their story. And being asked to switch to a standard template it feels like being told you have to give up all that experience that you have. Exceptions can be made. However, what they're talking about is not how most of us actually are. For the majority of speakers, the template really is less of a constraint and more of a support structure. It can remove decisions that you don't need to spend time on, and it helps you fit your talk cleanly into the rest of the program. And more importantly, it serves the audience and the event. Consistent layouts make it easier for people to follow along across multiple sessions. Standardized slides are less likely to cause problems for the AV teams, and the overall experience tends to feel a lot more cohesive. When people ignore the template, they're usually optimizing for themselves and not for the audience. I'm not saying you need to love it. I am saying you really should use it competently and move on from spending time on this. Once you've accepted that, however, then the next question is, how are you actually going to do the presentation? And this is where the flood of advice, I think, can get overwhelming because of a lot of it seems like it might contradict itself. You'll hear some people say you should use minimal slides, or maybe you should use very detailed slides, or maybe you should just script everything, or maybe you should never script, or that you should tell stories, or you should focus purely on content. Look, all of these approaches can work. What doesn't work is assuming that someone else's method will automatically work for you. At this stage, your goal isn't to perfect the talk, honestly. It's to decide how you're going to deliver it. Are you comfortable speaking from a few bullet points, or do you need a tighter structure? Do the slides help you think, or do they get in your way? Do you want people to be able to walk through the problem step by step with you, or do you want to build like a narrative around it? There's no universal answer here. If you want to see how different methods can work in practice, you can go to the ID Pro Speaker Workshop series. It's on YouTube, and that gives you a range of very experienced speakers talking about their approach. And you'll probably notice that there is no single pattern, right? Your job is to choose something that you can execute reliably when you're on stage, under time pressure, with an audience in front of you. Which brings us to the next issue, which is focus. And this is where most talks start to fall apart, to be honest. If you submitted a talk, it's probably on a topic you care about. You've probably spent time thinking about it, and you probably have a lot to say, which is kind of the problem because you do not have enough time to say all of it. Most conference sessions are 20 to 25 minutes. That's not a lot of time, and trying to fit everything in usually results in a talk that feels rushed or dense or very difficult to follow. So you have a choice. You can try and cover everything and hope people keep up. I do not recommend that. Or you can pick one core idea, maybe two, and make sure that that lands clearly. And if you think about it, only one of these approaches is really useful to your audience. The material that you cut isn't actually wasted, right? It's there to become blog posts, to become follow-up conversations, or additional resources that you can share later. A focused talk respects your audience time. An overloaded one tests their ability to process information at speed, right? Once you've figured out your approach and scope, though, now it's on to rehearsal. And so many people tend to skip this part or at least underestimate it. Looking at your slides is not rehearsal. Thinking through your points is not rehearsal. Rehearsal means actually delivering the talk out loud from beginning to end, preferably while you are standing and moving around, not sitting at your desk reading. And this is when your timing becomes real. This is when you notice where things are dragging, where the transitions don't quite work, or where you're trying to say too much in too little time. A simple process is usually enough, though, and that's go ahead and draft the talk, get your outline, run through it once out loud, then go ahead and actually record a full version of the talk and watch it back. Recording yourself is uncomfortable. I get that, but it is incredibly useful. You will notice things that you won't catch otherwise. You'll notice where you rush, where you ramble, where your slides and your words don't quite line up. It may take a minute for you to get past the, oh my gosh, I hate how much I sound. Once you actually start paying attention for the other things, you won't notice that. So yeah, it doesn't actually take all that long before the discomfort fades and you're just focused on fixing the issues. And in that point, you're in a much better position to refine the talk into something that actually works. Now, before you finalize anything, I've got one more bit of advice, one more question worth asking. And that is, what should someone do differently after your session? If you can't actually answer that clearly, your talk is probably still too broad. Good talks give the audience something they can use, a decision they can make, a risk they can better understand, or a trade-off they can evaluate. Everything in your talk should support that outcome. If it doesn't actually support that outcome, then you probably can remove it from the talk. And one more thing, something that people don't really necessarily think about. You're not actually just giving a talk, right? You're part of an event here. It's easy to treat a conference session as a single task where you show up, you present, you leave. But that's not actually how these things work from the audience perspective and from the organizers. You're contributing to the overall experience. And that means attending other sessions, engaging in conversations, and being available for follow-up questions. That's actually a big part of it, right? You've given this presentation. Be available for people to talk to you afterwards, if at all possible, because they're going to remember that almost more than they're going to remember the session itself. So those kinds of additional activities is where a lot of the value of actually being a speaker comes from. I mean, the talk gets you in the room. That's great, and that's important. But what you do after the talk determines what you and the others really get from it and the rest of the conference. So let's talk for a sec just about, okay, it's the day of the talk. You've done the rehearsals, but this is where your nerves are going to spike, even for experienced speakers. Absolutely, it happens. So let's reset your expectations here for a moment. You're not defending a PhD thesis. No one here is ready to interrogate you as if you had committed homicide. No one is hoping that you fail, right? For the duration of your session, the people in that room are your biggest fans. They chose to be there. They want to learn something useful. They want you to do well. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't care about doing a good job, but it does mean that you don't need to treat every small imperfection as a world-ending problem. You will say more than you intend. Or for me, my personal thing is you will say so this. Yes, it happens. You're also going to lose your place briefly, at least once during the talk. You will notice something that you wish you had phrased differently. Honestly, most of this is invisible to the audience unless you call attention to it. Your job is not to be perfect. Your job is to be clear, useful, and reasonably well-paced. And if you can do that, you're actually already ahead of a lot of the talks people tend to sit through. Okay, so yeah, there's a few common mistakes that are worth avoiding. Simple things like, do make sure that your clicker actually works the way you expect. You do not need to point it at the screen. That is not where the computer is. It makes me giggle every time I see a speaker turn to the big screen behind them and aim the clicker at it as if that's actually going to do the thing that they expect. It doesn't. Another thing, yeah, about that turning around and looking at the big slides behind you, do avoid constantly doing that. If the room is set up properly, you're actually going to have something called a confidence monitor in front of you. Use that. And of course, everyone's going to say this one, but it's worth repeating. About reading your slides, don't do that. Slides should support what you're saying, not replace it. And at the same time, they shouldn't be so minimal that they're useless afterwards because people are going to want to refer back to them for reference. There's a balance to find here. Let the slides carry your key points, your delivery, and your speaker notes carry the detail and nuance that people will check in on later. That way, the audience gets something engaging in the moment, and the people who couldn't make it or who got so much out of it they want to refer back to it can still follow along, which is really the goal. Now, most audiences here are very generous, right? They are going to meet you halfway. Your job is to make sure they don't have to do all of the work. Getting accepted means someone thinks you have something worth saying, which is no small thing. So what you do next is where that trust either pays off or kind of quietly fades, and this just is not so much your thing. You don't need to be perfect. You do need to show up prepared, focused, and respectful of the audience's time. And if you do that, you'll be fine. And if you catch yourself thinking, this talk might be good enough, I'm not going to look at it again. It might be worth taking a step back, taking a deep breath, and go through it one more time. Good luck, and I hope to see you on stage at the next major event. And that's it for this week's episode of the Digital Identity Digest. If it helps make things a little clearer, or at least a little more interesting, share it with a friend or colleague and connect with me on LinkedIn at HL Flanagan. And if you enjoyed the show, do be sure to subscribe and leave me a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find the written full post at sphericalcowconsulting.com. Now stay curious, stay engaged, and let's get these conversations going.